What's going on, everyone? Jack's here at a very public park where there is many practices going on and all of the people, but I'm here to bring you a review of the all-new Ford Ranger pickup truck. I've been spending a week with it, and as an admittedly not trucky guy, I thought I'd offer my thoughts and see if they provide you with a fresh perspective. Let's take a look. One of the best things you'll notice about the new Ranger is, of course, its styling. The Ranger looks fantastic. Ford really did a good job reskinning what is admittedly a pretty old model that's been around since 2012 in other parts of the world. But the Ranger looks really good, especially in this Ford blue color, which is not the actual name, but that's just sort of what I'm calling it because it looks quite fetching in Ford blue. I also think that the black wheels really help to set it apart. The FX4 package and the sort of higher ride height of the off-road package looks really good. The LED headlights and running lights have a really cool look when they're on, and I got complimented in a lot of places that I went because many people hadn't seen the new Ranger in person. So I think the Ranger kind of carves out a unique look for itself in a not particularly crowded field. I mean, you have the Toyota Tacoma, which looks basically the same as it's looked for eons, and the Nissan Frontier, which might have been rediscovered at the bottom of the ocean. The only other real competitor is the Chevy Colorado, which looks good, but I think the Ranger in certain trims looks even better. Actually, it's just really this trim that it looks better, but you know, it's the one I have. Now, one of the complaints people have about small light-duty trucks is that the bed size is not particularly large, and that's true with the Ranger. While the bed isn't big though, it is big enough to fit something like a dirt bike or, other small items. It's not like a full-size pickup truck. However, the bed is a decent size and has a spray-in bed liner. It does not have some of the other little bells and whistles that you find in some of its light-duty competitors, such as power plugs, storage compartments, secret cubby holes, all the kinds of little crawl spaces and things that you'd find in like the Honda Ridgeline. Toyota Tacoma also has some of these items where you can store some little goodies out of sight or small children. The Ranger doesn't have that. The bed is pretty standard and pretty basic. Also, as some people have complained about, the Ranger does not have a damped tailgate, which as a non-truck kind of person, I was sort of like, what's the big deal? But people made a good point that you don't necessarily want your tailgate flopping open every time you pull the handle. I don't know, it's a truck thing. Now, one thing the Ranger does have in abundance is power. The EcoBoost turbocharged 4-cylinder is a fantastic engine in this application. It's making about 270 horsepower, but over 300 pound-feet of torque, about 310 pound-feet of torque. And the Ranger is appreciably fast. Pulling out into traffic, putting the hammer down, the Ranger will get up and move, and it's significantly faster than many of its closest competitors. So if you've got a little bit of a lead foot like I do, I was pleasantly surprised that this little light-duty truck can get up and go, and it left other cars for dead. I was shocked at how fast the Ranger actually was. I think personally that this 4-cylinder EcoBoost engine that Ford has is kind of one of the most underrated engines on the market. I've experienced it in the Mustang a friend of mine had up at the tail of the Dragon of all places, and that engine in that car was not bad at all. Of course, everybody would think you'd want the Mustang GT up there, but EcoBoost 4-cylinder has a ton of low-down torque, and the 10-speed automatic does a decent job of making the most of it. Now, I say decent job because it can be extremely slow to shift. When you're pulling out accelerating at a moderate pace, it'll rifle through the gears pretty quickly, but when cruising and you drop the hammer, it will take eons to drop a gear, which seems ludicrous considering that you have 10 cogs from which to choose. You would think that it could knock off 1 or 2 of them to get you up to speed. That is something to consider. While the Ranger has a fantastic engine, the transmission calibration does neuter some of the fun in certain conditions. Now, what about this interior? Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that the Ranger seats, these leather-clad chairs, are eminently comfortable. They are phenomenal chairs in a light duty pickup truck, and I took it across Atlanta and I was comfortable and not fatigued. They are really nice seats, and I was pleasantly surprised by them. Another plus is the Bang & Olufsen B&O sound system. The B&O sound system is way better than I expected it to be. In fact, in a light duty pickup truck, even a top shelf model such as this, the Bang & Olufsen sound system was great. It sounded awesome. And I turned up my music and just blasted it and had a better experience than you'd have in some far more expensive kind of luxury-oriented automobiles. Really nice addition to this truck, especially this Lariat edition. The back seat is decently roomy. It's been knocked for not being quite as utilitarian as some light duty pickup trucks have in their back seat, namely the Toyota Tacoma, but it is appreciably roomy. It's covered in leather. It's got enough space for a small child. Hallie was able to fit back there, but Ella was like, no way, she would only sit in the front. So if you have a child who's pushing 5'11" or 6 feet tall, the back seat's not gonna cut it. Now, a few demerits in the Ranger's interior. While the interior design looks pretty nice overall, it is a truck, and that means hard plastic. However, in this Lariat edition, I feel like the hard plastic is a bit too everywhere. Even on the top of the doors, they are hard plastic. Everything you see and touch is hard plastic, except for a few select locations. I think that's a bit of a strike in a truck that cost $44,000. $44,000. Also, the Sync 3 system is good and the graphics are legible and it looks relatively nice, but like many of these systems, it was a little laggy and slow to respond at times. I like the redundant controls of the volume and the tuner knob for the stereo, but why are the climate controls microscopic and buried way down here? The USB ports are super far away. There's no wireless charging, and this pad down here is barely big enough for a regular phone. Kind of a reminder that this overall design has been around since 2012. And lastly, one of the things that I weirdly don't like about the interior is kind of the steering wheel. The spokes are quite large and fat, and they actually obscure the stalks and the mirror controls. And I'm not even kidding. I actually looked all around when I first sat in the car to adjust the mirrors before I realized that the controls were literally behind the steering wheel over here because they were completely blocked from my view. The gauge cluster also is kind of tiny by today's standards. You're used to getting these more digital dashes or large clear gauges with a digital screen in between. The Ranger has a speedometer, sort of traditional speedometer in the middle, flanked by two pretty tiny screens on either side. They're easy to use and they're pretty legible, but the information is limited and the size of the screens is pretty small. So, Future Jack's here, editing, and you're probably wondering, why am I in my office work in progress? And that's because it was about this time in the video that the wireless connection between my Lumix GH5 and my iPhone just sort of decided to stop. So I wasn't able to finish the video, and then it got dark, and then pretty much everything else went wrong. So let me kind of wrap up with some final thoughts on the Ford Ranger, because I never got to one of the most important and disappointing aspects of the Ford Ranger, and that's the handling. The Ranger's handling is borderline unacceptable. The ride is atrociously floaty. It wallows and dips over even the slightest road imperfection, and not in a compliant suspension comfort kind of way, or in a setup for off-road and capable kind of way, in more of a body control is non-existent kind of way. It's absolutely terrible the way the Ranger rides. On a straight line highway shot, when I drove it across Atlanta, the Ranger was decently comfortable, probably more to do with the seats than anything. But on any kind of curvy 2-lane road or any kind of road with imperfections, whether they're sharp impacts like potholes or whether they're heaves and dips in the road surface itself, the Ranger's ride is busy, bouncy, and as some reviewers have put it, almost motion sickness inducing. It's really kind of bizarre how the Ranger rides, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Combined with sort of a spongy brake pedal feel and stuff like that, the Ranger doesn't inspire much confidence. it's not a very well sorted chassis, and it's probably because the age of the platform. It is 7 years old, and it's been updated or tried to be updated to more modern standards. And ultimately, it doesn't work as well as something like a Chevy Colorado or a Toyota Tacoma. So unfortunately, at the end of the day, despite its handsome looks and its decent infotainment, its comfortable seats, its absolutely wonderful EcoBoost 4-cylinder, the Ranger's not really the small truck that you want to buy unless you're enamored with its good looks. The ride and handling trade-off is just not worth it, and you'd be better served either accepting the role of a small truck in your life and buying a Honda Ridgeline, which I haven't mentioned until now, but honestly, if you can get over the fact that the Honda Ridgeline is based on a sort of more car-based unibody platform, it's probably the light truck that would serve most of your needs if you have a confident sense of, you know, masculinity and all that. But the Ridgeline is probably the truck you're looking for, whether you can admit it to yourself or not. If you want to go off-road or perform some more heavy-duty tasks, you'd probably rather have something like the Chevy Colorado or the Toyota Tacoma, which is itself getting a little bit long in the tooth. And if you're looking for value or just something that looks like the underside of a dog's tongue, then you might want to get something like the Nissan Frontier, although I don't really know why you would. Unfortunately, the Ranger's a bit of a miss for Ford here. And I, for one, am eagerly awaiting what the next generation Ranger brings, and I imagine it'll be a lot better. And we would all love to see some type of Ranger Raptor, but I think it would have to be based on a much newer platform. So sorry the end of this video was a little anticlimactic, and it's here in this dirty and unsorted office, which I hope to have figured out sometime in the near future. But thanks for making it this far anyway. I promise you it won't be a habit. Until next time, this is Jax. Ride safe, drive safe. I'll catch you in the next review, hopefully outdoors. Peace.